Welcome to this short video from my side on prep for quantitative aptitude for the CAT. And as you know, and if you've seen my books, I divide the portion, and that's what you should do. You should divide your portion preparation wise into 6 blocks, first of all. And each block, so instead of taking 20 chapters as a challenge, the first thing you should do is you should look at 6 chapters, 6 blocks as a challenge. So block 1 is number systems and progressions. Block 2 is averages and allegation. Block 3 is all the arithmetic, including percentage, ratio, proportion, time and work, time, speed, distance, interest, profit and loss. That's block 3. Block 4 is geometry, mensuration, and coordinate geometry. Block 5 is functions, inequalities, the algebra part, functions, inequalities, logs, and equations, quadratic equations. And the last block is block 6, which is permutation, combination, probability. How does one prepare for data interpretation? Let me start off first by talking about what is data interpretation. Data interpretation, what is data first of all? If I give you a number like 35, is it data? No, it's not data. When does the number become data? So the answer to that question is the number becomes data when first a unit is attached to it and then some pointers are attached to it. So if you want to improve your DI, you first need to improve your understanding of what variables are given and what variables are extractable based on what is given. Because questions, the information they'll seek, will be either based on the given variables or based on the extractable or derived variables. And when DI becomes tough, it goes into the extractable or derived variables rather than on the given variables. Can you extract the data is what you are focusing on. Can you extract the information from the data given is what you're focusing on. And the skill you're trying to develop is exactly that. The extraction of information from data. So the process of preparation will involve, of course, improving the quality of your reading of variables in the question. You don't read stories. When you read the question, read variables. First step. Second, and when you're reading the variables, don't just focus on the given variables, also focus on the hidden variables. That's the first step. And second, of course, practice comes with a picture that everybody will tell you. The data interpretation part is now divided into 2 kinds of questions. Although the exam does not tell you this division, but there's a traditional DI, which is what CAT used to be and what even now the IFT and the SNAP or even the XLRA to a large extent is. Traditional DI is where it's more calculative, less logical. And the second part is logical DI, and this is something I've done in my books this year. Where my data interpretation book has been split into 2 parts, where the first part is completely traditional DI and the second part is completely logical DI. This is the only study resource which has this division, because I personally believe as a teacher, when I'm teaching a traditional DI question, the skills required or the skills I'm teaching my students is very different from when I'm teaching a student how to solve a logical DI question. So you need separate practice content for your traditional DI experience and development of your traditional DI experience and your logical DI experience. So first of all, split it into 2 parts, and then you'll start seeing the first 20 sets, everything will seem new. But by the 100th set of each type, traditional and logical, you'll start seeing patterns. You'll start seeing stuff which you'll see happening all the time. So the targets I normally tell people is maybe around 100 of each, 100 sets of each is maybe a starting point at which the discussion starts whether your DI is good or bad. Before that, you can't even look at whether DI is good or bad. So 100 sets of each, 100 sets of traditional, 100 sets of logical is your first threshold. And then you can perceive your learning skills. So for a lot of people, 200 sets will be enough to be able to go and crack in the exam. But you might need to stretch it to 300 or 400 sets. But that stretching will not happen on the traditional part, it will happen on the logical part. Because the traditional 100-150 sets are more than enough. You've seen 150 sets, you've seen them all. But logically, you might have to stretch it to 200-250 sets also of solving. And so that you have enough experience. And as I said, it might work for you in 100 sets, depending on your learning skills, how quick a learner you are. Or it might be stretched to 300 sets for you if you're not such a good learner or not such a quick learner. And then of course the mock test, you move into the mock test once you have reached that point. And then improve your decision making. so that you can select the right sets and solve them within the hour. So that's about it for DI prep. In LR you can do a question type division of questions. So there are around 8-9 question types that you focus on. These are arrangements, team selections, rankings, puzzles, quantitative reasoning, games and tournaments, set theory, network diagrams, coding, decoding, not the time period variety, but a different kind of variety on coding, codes, etc. And coding, decoding, and then miscellaneous puzzles. So your LR prep process involves you to do around 300 to 400 sets of these 9-10 varieties overall. And once you reach that point where you've done that, you will start realizing that in fact even at half that point, even at let's say you're talking about arrangements, at the 25-30 set mark that you solved 30 sets of arrangements, you start realizing from the 31st set onwards that whatever you are doing fresh, whenever you're picking up a fresh set, it's more or less the same as the previous one. So there's nothing new happening in the new sets. So when that starts happening, you start realizing there's nothing more that I need to do in this section, and then you just practice and both for DI and LR, and in fact also for quants. One more thing you need to do is once you start getting to a point where I can solve anything, you need to build speed. So speed के लिए LR, DI, quants सब में, and even English, the biggest common contributor of speed is to be able to solve questions in one reading. So one of the tips for speed that I tell people is that you eliminate your need for a second reading, whether it's an RC passage or an LR question or a DI question or a quants question. So try to focus on that. That's the biggest contributor to speed. And that's how the 100 percentiles are very different from the 99s and the 95s, because they read the paper only once. And when you read the paper only once, you can read the entire paper. If you're reading questions twice and thrice while solving, you will be able to solve or read only 60-70% of the paper. And obviously you can't compete with a better person who's reading the paper only once. He's reading 100 questions. You're reading 60 questions. You can't compete there. So just focus on one reading. The second contributor of speed is reduction of how much you write. And then comes technique of how to solve the question. So if you start dealing with these things, you will start getting control of the questions you're solving. Once you get control, the exam is a very simple exam. All the best for CAT. I wish you can crack this exam and take off to the land of your dreams as you go forward in the journey. Thanks a lot. Been a pleasure being with all of you. Bye-bye.